Welcome to another gorgeous day, although it's crappy weather where I am. I hope it's better where you are. And another day of Dose of Did You Know, where intriguing, unique individuals come to talk love and life and how it got them to where they are today. I am your host, Danny Rocco, and with me is somebody that I just met. And he is a jokester. I'm always like, hey, whatever floats your boat, buddy. And he's like, are you serious? And I'm like, I don't know if that's your jam. Who am I to judge? But Hamody, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you? Thank you very much for having me, Dan.
I am doing fantastic. So, fun fact about us is that he lives kind of where I grew up. So we were just chatting about old times, about how it's like living in the South, and anyways, but no one needs to hear about our conversation. We want to know about you. Tell the world a little bit about who you are.
My name is Hamody Jasim. I'm born and raised in Iraq. I was an Iraqi soldier that got recruited by the U.S. intelligence in 2005. Ended up working as an intelligent asset for the U.S. intelligence during the Iraq War, during the surge. Um, some people consider me a spy of the surge. Some people look at me in different ways, and it's just a happened to be someone who was in the right place at the right time for the U.S. intelligence at the time. Met all the qualifications, had the same interest as they did, and never expected as a young child, in your life that you will end up being like James Bond in the movies. But I wish it was the same experience.
Yeah.
It
Can you,
was.
can you shake or stir?
Yeah, it really, like my whole life, in when I was a teenager in Baghdad, I went and applied for acting school. This is really what my passion was about, is making films and get into acting. But the war have just kind of really took me into a different direction. And a couple years later, I end up finding myself in uniform. A couple years later, I am a spy for the U.S. intelligence, operating against some of the most dangerous terrorist organizations in the world, like Al Qaeda and the Islamic State, who's now ISIS, called ISIS. And it was just, you find yourself in those situations that you don't have any control over. And, I'm just happy and honored that whatever happened in my life, it happened for a reason. And
Mm.
it was for a good reason.
Well, I always say, right, your life is kind of predestined. It's what you do with it kind of makes all the difference. It decides where the path is that you go. But how do you get? What is the mind behind the man that's like, I'm going to go to acting school or film school? And I kind of see that as yeah, actors can be a little metrosexual and they can be a little, I don't know. I don't see him being like who you are now. So how did you go from that to a soldier?
I think because Iraq at the time was under the control of Saddam Hussein. He was a dictator that had Iraq under control. Life was not as, you can imagine what Americans or other people outside of the world live. I mean, I lived in a very much a socialist country controlled by a dictator like Saddam Hussein, who admires Stalin and Fidel Castro, and
Mm-hmm.
he made sure that we were hungry enough, but we had nothing else to think about other than just trying to get our meals for the rest of the day. I remember, the sanctions on Iraq during the 90s after the first Gulf War. We were limited in food. We were limited to everything we were doing in our lives.
Yeah.
We had to conserve everything, including the pencils that we would use at school. It wasn't what the average American would think we were living. I just remember I didn't eat meat for about 7 years. Because meat was just so expensive and you had to survive. You were giving specific amount of supplies every month to live and just get by. And if you end up eating extra than what you had for the day, you end up going hungry for a day or two.
Right.
So it was a very complete different life. I mean, regardless of what your passion was, regardless that I was just a kid that wanted to go to acting schools and make films. I didn't want to be a spy. I didn't want to be a soldier. I didn't want to shoot people or do any of that. But it just shows you sometimes the war affections on a human being life.
Mm-hmm.
It's massive that the war is it's such a strong wave that could just take you really far from what your life is supposed to be. And
Yeah.
I can say the war took me real far in an area where I was not expecting to be. I wasn't the guy that grew up saying, "Hey, I want to be a spy when I grow up." Um, that wasn't my dream. That wasn't my goal at all. I never thought I would be standing 5 feet from Al Qaeda leaders, battling them, locating them, or collecting intelligence on them. That was not in my book or diary at all. Um, However, I realized later in life that whatever happened happened for a reason. My experience was not all bad at all. Perhaps, I was able to help. I was able to save some American lives. I was able to bring soldiers home to their families. I was able to make a difference in the war if I could. And these are things that I'm proud of, and I'm glad that God had put me in that position.
Well, isn't that kind of funny when you look back, right? Because everything makes sense when you look back. I'm like, oh, that's why I had my son at 16. Did not seem like a great idea and plan at the time. But
Yeah,
now I'm like, oh, it's brought me exactly to here right now. Because if I didn't have him, I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be doing what I do.
yeah.
When you think back, and now look, you wanted to be in films, you wanted to do this, and you kind of are doing it, but based off of what was strategically placed in your life that you had no idea about.
Absolutely. I mean, I think my whole life was literally just nothing but surprises, one surprise and another. Nothing that I had done in my life that I actually expected. so, so it really, it's one thing on another. The good thing that I found in that experience is that I was able to adapt to whatever situations that I was in,
Yeah.
and being able to survive through it. Um, the damage you take from experiences like that, being in combat, losing people on a daily basis. It doesn't hit you right away as much when you're there. It hits you later in life when
Mm-hmm.
you get older, or one day you find peace within your life, or you just feel like it hits you later. I feel like I am more battling the things that I saw in Iraq in 2005 today than I was that day in 2005.
You
Um,
know, I was talking to a Korean war vet, and I said, and he would see like 20 to 30 casualties and injuries. He was a medic on the front line.
yeah,
Every hour. I thought it was every day. It's like, no, Danielle, it's every hour. And I said, well, how did you get through it? Because you just did it. There was no
yeah,
time to think. You were just in this mode and in this
yeah,
movement. And when you become peaceful and you kind of settle, I think then things that you have kind of pushed
yeah.
down
Um,
start to come up. But
and
what was that transition like going from one country's military to another country's military?
I honestly look, if you think about Baghdad in 2005 to 2007, an example, there was about 50 dead bodies every single morning in Baghdad. Bodies that are thrown all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there were casualties every single day. You saw death, you saw children die, you saw women die, you saw old men die, you saw innocent people get shot in the middle of a firefight. Um, when you're in that environment, you do not get affected as much, because you're soaked in that environment. You're marinated in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of your reality. Um, when you come here, and all of a sudden, it's just like I take you out of a very loud nightclub to a very quiet area, very silent. I mean, when I came to this country, I think I got depressed for about 6 months. The first time I put my foot in the United States. I mean, I was lucky to come here alive. I was lucky to be here and be well, and get my medical treatments by the U.S. government and everything. And the same token, I was miserable for 6 months because I got taken out of a very loud, crazy environment where I felt a purpose every day. I felt like I was filling something. I was there for a reason.
Right.
I was changing someone's life, and all of a sudden, I found myself like just living to be me. And I found that to be really boring. Like I was like, wow, like, as much as I hated where I was, but now I appreciate it more because I guess you don't get affected mentally and physically on these things, on these events, or in any aspects. You don't get affected until you're out of it, until it's
Mm-hmm.
over.
Yeah.
And then that's when you really realize that you were winded so many times, and you're hurt physically and mentally, and that's when you realize your wounds.
How old were you when you came here? When you set foot on in the United
Um,
States?
I was about 22 years old.
Okay,
Yeah,
so young, and
yeah,
it is, you do enough like brain research and talk, and I can like
yeah,
nerd out on that stuff a lot. Is that you live in a heightened state? Your brain is always in a fight mode, so that
yeah,
normalcy is normal. It doesn't know how to react in any other way. So you totally
yeah,
shot your brain waves, basically, in a layman's terms of
yeah,
speaking, of coming here, because you didn't have to. As a child, you grew up and you had these ambitions, but you also had a reality of lack, a reality of survival that you were
yeah,
doing, and then you move into, at such a young age, of a very powerful responsibility. I mean, did
yeah.
they say, "Hey, you're going to be a spy," and you're like, "Cool, like I want to know that conversation." I mean, maybe you can't tell me that conversation, but you like, what did you think when the Americans came to you and said, "We want you"?
I think I was scared more than anything because, to people, this is a big deal here in this country. It's a big honor, but you have to look at it in a different way from the other side of the scope. In my country, this was a treason. In my country, there's a law that if you communicate with any foreign intelligence of any sort, you deserve to be executed in the public or in the court of law. Um, it meant that if people like Al Qaeda or the Islamic State or any other terrorist organizations like the Iranian operatives in Iraq at the time, which smell something like that, they will not just only go after you if they can. They will go after family members of yours. They'll go after children. They'll go after women. So to me, it didn't look the same as it is as an American field agent here in the U.S. gets a job and a badge. For me, I was an intelligence asset. I was somebody that was offered to communicate with a foreign intelligence and help them locate bad people in Iraq. And collect intelligence on the enemy. So to me, is I thought about the consequences more than anything else, and I knew that taking a a road like that, it would only cost pain, and any little mistake that I make, it will end up costing people their lives. So I think I grew older. I was 19 years old at that time, and the
Mm-hmm.
responsibility I was given uh, for someone who's supposed to be way, way, way older than me. Um, and things are happen for a reason. Honestly,
Yeah.
that's I always say that. Um, Sometimes I wonder, when I look at that kid and I look at that version of myself, and I'm like, how the hell was I able to endure all these things? I'm like, unless the agency gave me some enhancement drugs that I didn't know about. Um, and it really just I wonder all the time. I'm like, that version of that person and this version of me is two different people, because that version was completely focused, was completely focused on the job. I didn't sleep for 72 hours for one time. I
Mm-hmm.
I, I was just a machine. I operated in the daily basis, and I don't know if it's because it was the excitement of it. I don't know if it was my brain, which I found out later in life that if it's my brain was set for uh, a period of time that's not where my age. I was only 19. My head
Right.
was supposed to think of what a 19-year-old supposed to think, and at that point, my brain was set to a point where having high focus, paying high attention to details, watching every single step the enemy would make, because it would make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
I think my brain opened certain patterns in it that I was not be able to put back. And
Right.
it's hard once your brain is exposed to that kind of environment, and then you come in trying to go back to the normal life. I mean, I couldn't go back when I came out of that environment at 22-year-old. I couldn't go back to being a 22-year-old. I couldn't go back
No.
to being the the kid that I was supposed to be. And it was different experience. Perhaps is it still a different experience to this day. And for soldiers who suffer from PTSD out there, I understand they've been in this environment, maybe one deployment over 12 months, maybe 6 months. For me, as I was born in that environment.
Mm.
And this environment got an even worse when I went through the 5 years of war in Iraq from '03 to '08. I mean, you're talking about the worst years Iraq have ever seen since 1980, since the Iran-Iraq War. And this war was in their homeland. It was inside of Iraq. It was in the middle of the city in Baghdad. It was not on the borders. So, the amount of violence, without disrespecting anybody that have been to combat, uh, any soldier that have served in Iraq between '03 to 2008 would tell you every year is different than the other. Like in 2005, I said hopefully 2006 will be a better year, and I end up being worst, and it just
Right.
kept getting worse and worse. And for me, as I was living that war, the whole 5 years of it, I'm there, and I got to live it, and I didn't have any options.
Right. So do you think when you made that choice that you were going to cross that line and work, with the Americans, and you had all of those things that you just talked about, like really basically stacked up against you, there was maybe the hope of something positive or a greater purpose. Was there a moment in your mind that like switched and you just said, this is what I have to do to really make the change? Or were you just kind of numb and you went through it? Yes, you strategically understood the danger of saying yes, but was there a moment where you're like, yep? Or did you just kind of numbly kind of go through it and just knew that you were supposed to?
Honestly, you can. I think I got that feeling that it was meant to happen. I was meant to be there. Because when you look around you at that environment back in that time, there was nobody else. There was nobody else they would have picked to do the job other than you. You're just the click that happened. And for me, it was just, you know, um, for me, yes, I mean, somehow God wanted to make a difference, and I'm glad I was the tool that I was the tool that to be used to make that difference. For me, it was more personal. It was more a lot of these American soldiers I friended in combat. I had a very long relationships with, got to know a lot about their families. So to me, it was a lot more. But to be honest with you, I didn't expect I was gonna live. That was not in my book. I just looked at it as, look, if I live another year, it will be a great year, and I'll be lucky if I get another year in that war, and then I'll just be a tombstone like anybody else
Mm-hmm.
that died in that war. The casualties were crazy amount every single day that dies. The people you met and you friended last year are not with you this year. You're meeting new people. So it really was. It was at a point in my life where I felt like, you know what, this is what I was born to do. I was born to do this, and if something happened, I guess that's the life.
Right.
That's what happens.
Right. So you come here, fast forward, you come here, and you get sick, right?
Yeah,
There was a medical. I mean, I don't know if
yeah,
it's, yeah.
yeah.
So,
I end up. I mean, honestly, the when I was in the Iraqi MOD, where I was working undercover and for 3 years in Iraq. That area specifically where I operated and where I slept, where I really, because I couldn't be in that building anywhere, I couldn't sleep anywhere. It was not safe for me, so I had to be in a certain areas to protect myself, where I had people who are around me protecting me, and I wasn't just doing this alone, like doing this in my own, like people would think it's by like James Bond goes in among the enemy and do this. I had so many people behind me that were doing so much out there to keep me going, to keep me alive. And I end up sleeping in areas that were airstriked during the invasion of Iraq in 2003. I was not aware whether the U.S. government have used to airstrike these areas because they used to be residential areas that Saddam used. There are tunnels under it that were used by Saddam. So I am not saying that it was an evil power that used uranium exposure, whatever they used to get rid of that. However, I was not aware of that. And I will say the moment I came to this country, I think within about 2 to 3 months, I started having like weird symptoms. And I just felt like, you know what, you've been blowing up so many times, you've been shot twice. You can't expect your health to be completely 100%. And it was really weird.
yeah.
It was difficult. I never like went to the doctors or anything like that. And over the years, things just got worse and worse and worse. Then until about 2018, I ended up being diagnosed with a brain tumor. I was all of a sudden getting extra weight. I was my face started changing. My so you know the as I said before, is the damages you take out of that experience are
Yeah.
unstoppable. They never stop. They go with you the rest of your life, and you know, everybody has to take a hit somewhere, and I feel like I have taken mine just like anybody else. There may be a lot of people out there that are suffering with more or worse conditions than I do. There are people that died from exposure to radiation and didn't make it. And I'm just thankful to be here every single day that I'm
So,
here in this planet.
your childhood changed you a little bit. Your choices along the way changed you a little bit. The tumor changed you a little bit. When did you decide to share your story? And does it feel like you're kind of living out that passion that you have?
Oh, my story was shared way before that. My story was shared in 2015 when my book got released. And then my film started filming around 2016. I end up having hectic times with producing the film and everything, and I end up releasing it in 2019.
Yep.
I end up going to film school, like training on film, getting film training, and I end up actually directing my own story, my own documentary. So,
Okay, so we'll go back because I had the timeline a little
yeah,
wonky, but what
yeah.
made you do it? It's still the same question. Why do that in 15? Was it part of your healing? Did you just feel like,
No, no, no. I got sick
cool?
way before after that. No, it was. I have to be honest with you, Danny. I have dealt with very very hard times coming to this country, um, and it's not this country. It's not the American people. I have dealt with situations that I couldn't understand. That maybe I understand why
Mm,
these things happen. Before I didn't have any knowledge of really why things were happening. I mean, I've dealt with racism, discrimination, people who would people didn't know this person. You know, I looked like just like any other brown guy out there, trying to make his living, trying to do his thing. And unfortunately, we do have some people who are prejudiced, who are maybe not educated enough.
yeah.
They might not be prejudiced, but they might not be educated enough. They don't understand it because they only see the war through the news. They only see it through Fox and NBC and CNN. And it's hard. You know, it was hard for you to
Yeah.
come in with that much knowledge and expect the American people to know that, which that's what I got hit with. And I went through a lot. Like not one situation or two. It was many, to a point where
Mhm.
I felt, you know what, it was important to let people know, like, hey, you know what, um, this is what happened back there.
Yeah.
That's not. You might have a different idea. You might look at the war through a reporter on Fox News or CNN, but that's not what happened because he wasn't there, and they're not telling you the truth. And
Mhm.
I felt like somehow that the truth needs to come out, and I started seeing that many American soldiers were dying due to insider threat, which was a very big thing in my life, something that I combated. Insider threat is when somebody who works among the enemy, or the enemy works among U.S. troops, or and they end up attacking U.S. troops and killing them. Unfortunately,
Like double
one
crossing?
173 Americans died since 2007 due to these kind of attacks. In my book, I operated for about 5 years in that building. I did not have one single casualty. I did not lose one American. I had one American that was about to be kidnapped, which I saved him out and took him out of the building and evacuated him before Al Qaeda got into him. So I happened to be the only successful experiment of insider threat that ever happened. So I felt the need that it was not just to tell my story or to prove to the world that what I have done. It was more of to get the next generation to understand the dynamics of that war, to
Right.
understand how really the game is. And I end up actually working with the U.S. military and training soldiers on insider threat. So yeah, it's just, you can say it's so many situations that got me to really feel the need. Perhaps I end up marrying an American woman who is just probably from right across the borders of yours in Vermont. um, and a lot of her family members, when we first met, didn't hear about this American hero or war hero. There was no book, there was no documentary. There was none of that. There was just a guy from the Middle East,
Mm,
they were extremely prejudiced, extremely bad in a way. Some of them are still bad in a way, and I saw ignorance that I have never seen before. Honestly,
yeah,
I saw people who were very self-opinionated, selfish, and not educated, and it was hard
has
dealing with
to
those people.
hurt. Yeah, like that would be a different pain than the pain
Yeah.
you experienced growing up, the pain that you saw in war.
Mm.
That is more of a very deep hearted
Yeah.
emotional pain, knowing what you did, what you sacrificed, what you've given, and then people just to look at you
Yeah.
and put you in as, well, you're just a terrorist, dude. I don't even want to
Yeah.
get to know you. You're just
Yeah,
that.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you were judged like like I'll be honest with you, like some of this members of my wife's family I never met, I never had a conversation with, I never had any encounters with them. They refused to be at the wedding. They refused to acknowledge my child. They refuse, and it's just to a point where I felt like, I came to this country, someone who fought for this country in the front lines at the highest levels possible. I came here to be criticized by people who ran away from war.
Right.
I came here to be criticized by the children of people who ran away from the Vietnam War, who pretended to be sick. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's when I felt like I was really I was being put in a tough situation that, like, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Like, you didn't have, you had the opportunity to defend your country and you didn't. And now you get to judge me for just being different than you are. And of course, these individuals are not veterans. They're not people who are patriotic. They're not people who are pro-Americans. Perhaps the veterans and the people that I served with, all of them, every single soldier I met who served in Iraq has been nothing but compassionate and respectful to me. So I kind of see myself among these veterans.
Mm-hmm.
I see really myself in their eyes because they understand it.
Yeah.
But I get to have, these ran over with some civilians who never, who get educated out of CNN or Fox, or the whole entire media educates them about what people are in the Middle East. And that's how, unfortunately, that's how it is. And I'll say it, like, I had um the weirdest experience that anybody could imagine. That I was told the South would be a racist place, bad place. They will not be welcomed of you. I moved into the South, and every single person I met was nice. Every single person I was comfortable with. I met people who was carrying the Confederate flag, and they were nice and respectful to me. And I never saw any prejudice in their eyes. And I
Yeah.
was told these people will pull a gun and shoot me if they see me. And what makes me upset is that I got discriminated by the educated people in New York City. I got
Yeah.
discriminated against by people who are supposed to be more modern, more open to diversity in New Jersey. And I
Mm-hmm.
got discriminated by these people in Connecticut. And I
Yeah.
come here to the South, and I meet a guy with a Confederate flag who is completely patriotic, never ever seen a guy my color before in his town, and comes in to give me a handshake and tell me thank you for your service. So I got confused
Yeah.
um, about a lot about what I was told about what America is about. And
Well, you had to
mm,
learn what America is, because just as these people are, sheeps being led by what they're told, it's
yeah,
kind of like you are. So, how do you not, or maybe you do hold resentment, or how do you not hold resentment about, because people are people.
yeah,
There's going to be ignorant people. There are going to be people that don't want to think, that just want to be led. There are going to be people that don't lead with their heart. They lead out of
yeah.
fear. So, how does someone like yourself, with the experience you have had your whole entire life, not get pissed off and hold hate in your heart? Because that'll lead you
Um,
to kill you. Was it
Honestly,
really hard?
look, if I was in Iraq back where I was, if I was that same gangster guy, I would have taken care of things with them differently. I just felt to a point like, you know what? These individuals are ignorant. Because I was somebody who has access to the national database, I looked at all their background checks. I got to see all their psychological aspects. There just happen to be racist people who were raised by racist people, and they're only exposed
Yeah.
to hate their whole entire life. Um, and I refused to to like really associate with these individuals. And perhaps I came here and I met everybody with love and respect. I perhaps showed up and spoken in some of the rallies that were like not one in history ever been a brown guy on those stages ever. And I showed up, and the people told me that you were going to get shot. They're probably going to beat you. I showed up alone. I was not armed, and I just had a great company. I would receive respect, and what most mattered to me is I was able to change these people mindset.
Right.
And they came to me right after those events or speeches and said, hey, you know what, I used to think the whole Middle East is bad. I used to think everybody over there wants to kill us, but after hearing you, I don't think that anymore.
Mm,
I think if people have that, um, if they have that kind of acceptance, then they're not racist. They might not be educated enough, but they were not racist because they accepted the change. They accepted me, and
mhm.
that they should not be called racist. And perhaps it's kind of interesting to me because um, now I see some of these individuals in my wife's family who are extremely racist, extremely prejudiced, get to criticize the president and call him racist. So it really interests me, like just kind of interests me to see how these individuals are shaped, to see how these individuals are thinking.
Yeah.
And I find myself, I get along with people who are more passionate. And I understand it. I know a lot of people who love their country, love America.
Mhm.
Um, they love this experiment. They want to defend America with everything they got. I mean, hey, this is not a bad thing to have. You
Yeah.
should be able to feel that way. You should be able to defend this country. If an Iraqi guy who was never in America got to do that, you should be able to feel that way too. Because we all had that same feeling that everybody wanted to be part of this beautiful experiment that's called America.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing. And it's not what other people look at it. Oh, you know, these people are racist because they're so. It's nothing wrong with being a pro-American or being somebody who loves America. And that's what I found is that when I came here to the South, a lot of people were friendly, were welcoming, and
Isn't
um,
it so funny how, the perceptions of life, but I think I like most when you said the difference of racism and ignorance, right? Because
yeah,
you don't know what you don't know. And if someone just doesn't know and then they hear something and they can adjust their opinion using their brain, what a great way of clarifying that. So would you say that your movie is a mix of like a documentary of the actual war and a little bit of, a racial empowering kind of connection? Like,
you know, to me, it was really never about race or anything. I put this film out there to educate the next generation, to get the soldiers who are fighting in the front line to have the same amount of expertise that I had there. It's years and years of getting to know the enemy
yeah,
and figuring out the patterns that the enemy has. And I just didn't. I felt like I was out of the fight. I was not in there anymore. And I'm carrying tools and knowledge that nobody has.
right,
And it's not fair for me to keep that to myself. And I let it go, and perhaps I've been training soldiers for 11 years who are going to the front line and insider threat on psychological warfare. I just said it was never about race for me. These individuals who gave me bad experiences in the North were happened to be as comebacks. That to put it in a good way, happened to be people who are extremely racist, had never done anything honorable in their life. Their parents were horrible people, raised them to be horrible people. And perhaps, you know, there's a lot of patriots up north in New York City and New Jersey
I mean,
that
I have
calls me out, that calls me up and calls me out and brings me over to speak. And I had a great you know, perhaps when I was ill and I was dealing with my health issues, um, a gentleman by name Steve Mazzola, he was a president of a biker club, a band of brothers in New Jersey, called me out, brought me up. The whole entire town was shut down for me. I was being received as a honestly, I was received. I had a whole town get shut down in every corner. Police officers were there, and these people did a ride through the Jersey Turnpike in my honor. There's wonderful people everywhere. I had nothing but a great experiences, and I will never compare the experience that I had with my wife's family, who happened, as I say, and I repeat it, who happened to be people who ran away from the Vietnam War, who happened to be people who never served, never shed one single drop of blood to this country. Happened to be immigrants by myself. They came from somewhere too.
Yeah.
But they felt that they were much more superior than anybody else. And I just felt, hey, I am just gonna move on in life and do my thing, and I will not let these people ever judge me or try to judge my child or try to
Mhm.
shame me of anything. And to this day, I look at these people and I feel bad for them because
Yeah.
they are extremely blind, extremely prejudiced, and they see themselves as wonderful people, but they're not. And
Yeah, it's a sad place for them to live, and you just have to show by your actions, right? You lead by action. So you lead with love, and that is all you can do. People can choose to follow, or they can choose to stay where they are. And that's just what's great. But the great thing is, we're in America, so you can do that or not do that. You can
yeah,
choose to
absolutely. And
not choose.
indeed, and it's really, look, I mean, to me, is, I am so happy where I am. I am so happy that I'm surrounded by people that love me every single day. I don't pay attention to these individuals anymore. I don't care about them. I don't, they made their choices. This is who they are.
Yeah.
And it really was, if you judge somebody before knowing who they are, then guess what? You are an ignorant person. I never judged a terrorist before I looked in their files.
Right.
Some members of Al Qaeda and Islamic State who I fought against, who are extremely vicious, I found to be something good about them in their files. There's something good about those human beings. And if they just decided to take a different route in their life, they would have been a great people. They would not
Right.
have ended up, but life took them to that way because they decided to let hate control their hearts. But coming back to these individuals who are supposed to be family members of mine, who are supposed to um, be friendly, who's supposed to, like I didn't spend one day or one week around these people. I mean, look, I was married for 10 years. 10
Yeah.
years. 10 years. I've married for 10 years. And these people had 10 years of nothing. I never got any love or respect or anything from these individuals because they were
This is,
racist.
yeah, this is
They were,
a lesson for people that are just out there listening. When you don't, you said it, you said this yourself, like when you don't open your mind to get to know someone and you
yeah,
cast a judgment on them, in my opinion, you are just missing out on so many parts of living a fulfilled life. And if
yeah,
that's your choice, that's your choice. And then you move on, and the other people, why even give power and energy to it? So you have obviously moved on, done these amazing things, lived a life that is
yeah,
made for a movie, hence
yeah.
it
And
is
I,
in a
and
book.
I, and I want to make it clear that I am not saying like everybody's in the north that way. I have wonderful people up north that loves me and I see every year. I spend time with. I have lots of friends out there, a lot of patriots out there that I mean something to.
Yeah.
Perhaps when I go to New York City, I go anywhere else. I meet a lot of friends, Marines that I met in
Yeah.
combat. A lot of them I have even never met. Um, what I'm saying is that I am someone who is conservative. And I'm absolutely not saying that every Democrat is that way. I was brought to this country by a Democrat. A Democrat fought to make sure I come to this country alive. Colonel John Burke. He is a hardcore Democrat. I'm a hardcore conservative. We both we both fought this enemy. We both shot at this enemy. This is the beautiful part about America, is that we both got to have different opinions. We both have to look at things different way. We're
Mhm.
never going to be the same. However, there are people who hides, who pretend to be not racist, pretend to be, they are very accepting people, but in reality, they are racist people. In
Mhm.
reality, they will never accept anybody in their family. They'll be like, I want peace for everybody and diversity. But the moment someone's of color marry their daughter, it's no, no. So this is what I suffered with, is these individuals who try to look wonderful, who's probably members of the US education system. Some of them are teachers and principals and whatever
Mhm.
they are, which I find that surprising. Like I would never let these people near any education anything because they are poison. And it really it just amazed me how the ignorance is
Yeah.
that this same individuals who have done these horrible things to me or done these horrible things to other people get to call our president to be racist. And I'm like, wow, like that's kind of like it just opened my mind. And look, I was not when I would want to say this, I was not the first person in this family of color. um when I came and met my wife, which I didn't
So
realize
it
there was a
wasn't you as an individual. It's just the mindset of people. And that is one thing. But you were past that. You
yeah,
are we're not going to sit on that. But I
yeah,
want to ask you this one last thing before
yeah,
we go, which kind of ties into the leading with the love
yeah.
and letting hate stay outside of us, not come into us. But in this moment right now, what does love mean to you?
um what does love mean to me? You know, being open-minded, that's I think what it
Mhm.
means. It means to me being open-minded, like don't judge people until you get to know who they really are, and don't judge a book by its cover. And
Yeah.
that's what I find people a lot to judge really fast. And
Mhm.
I'm not the type of guy to go brag about my service or tell you what I've done or do this, but just treat me like every single human being that you would treat out there,
Yeah.
and be fair. Be fair. That's
Yeah.
all I. That's what my love means to me. It's like, if you have to be fair, you can't just really be that prejudiced, be that ignorant. And if everybody learns to love, I think we will have no issues in this
Mhm.
country at all. We will have no problems, and we will not be in this situation right now where our country is going, where things
Yeah.
are out of control. And it makes me upset, right? Because I came from the side where I saw Americans fighting side by side, whether you're a liberal, Democrat, black, white, Hispanic, Latino, whatever you were, you were fighting in the same side for one purpose. And now I see a very, you know, people are getting way too prejudiced and don't love anymore, perhaps.
Well, it's you know what? We all we can do is control ourselves and lead about with the way that we want to lead, and that is it. You lead by example. When more people do that, can actually lead with love, the bigger and the better the world will become. So just one person at a time. And to everybody out there that is listening, as always, remember, love hard, love pure, and love proactive. Until next time, we will see you. Take care.